Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you out there. I am Ed Denzel, if there was any question about that. And this is Unfound Live for February 23rd, 2026. We're almost through 2 months. It's hard to believe. I don't know where the year is going. I have a fantastic show lined up. I actually have a lot in here, and I'm really going to try to get all of it. Probably going to cover more topics overall tonight than I usually do. You know what I usually after I get the personal stuff out of the way, maybe 3, maybe 4 topics. I have more than that I would like to cover tonight. So I'm going to be working really, really hard tonight. I'm going to be sweating by the time this is over, maybe. But I have a fantastic show lined up for all of you as you are watching/listening tonight. Please give this show a thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, join the group, the discussion group, like the page, share the page. Go to the website, theunfoundpodcast.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. You know, all those places. As you can see in the title, got at least those 3 items will be covered tonight. I want to talk about Helen Brock. If the last name sounds familiar to you, yes, from the Brock Candy Company. I had mentioned this regarding Nancy Guthrie. I've told you that just off the top of my head, I knew about another, let's just say, older than the average age woman in the United States who went missing. Probably foul play, abducted. Well, I did take some time to look her disappearance up, her case, etc., and going to go over it. Not really going to analyze it like I usually do when I've been picking out a disappearance every week. Not going to go that deep into it because it's fairly complicated. There are a lot of names. And really all I want to show is a different example of when, like I said, I don't want to call her old, just an older than the average age woman goes missing, and why that would be, why that might be. And then for yourselves, you can compare that to Nancy Guthrie and see if there's anything that is comparable, contrastable, all of that. Of course, we have huge Molly Miller and Colt Haynes news. It does seem that their remains have been found. So we're going to go over that. And then also, of course, Nancy Guthrie continued. I have to keep doing it. Unlike most other people who never covered disappearances at all, but have then jumped on the true crime bandwagon, I am actually in the disappearance business, so I get to talk about Nancy Guthrie as much as I'd like, and I'm not an opportunist. This is what I do all the time. So we're going to do that, but I also want to talk about how I did a little snooping around on a disappearance in my area this past week. In fact, I can tell you that this particular disappearance will be the topic of the next Unfound Now, which will be coming out at the end of the week. I also, what story I also want to cover is someone that a lot of you I've seen have posted on Facebook and elsewhere about this woman, Michelle Hundley Smith, who went missing and now in 2001. And we know that she went off and started a new life. So I'm going to read an article about that. I'm going to take a look at what was known at the time, and I'm going to try to see had we featured this disappearance at some point, of course, before now, when it was still unsolved, what would I be thinking? Would I be able to predict this outcome? Going to do my best. Going to try to be as honest as possible about it. So who is in here tonight? So like I said, I got a lot to do. Mary, what's going on? D, hello, D. I guess Charlie didn't make it this evening. Hello, Lisa. Look at you, all in time and everything. Good evening, Lisa. Good to see you. Mary's always enjoys the lives, and Mary, it was good seeing you last night in the think tank. Hello, Rose. Hello. There's Charlie right there. Rose, Glenn, Amy, D says, hey, Ed, did you think about what I DM'd you? Yeah, I saw it. I really did not have a chance to analyze it very closely, D, in preparing to talk tonight. So just being honest. Hello, Jane. What's going on? Probably my favorite Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship song is Jane. By the way, that is a fantastic tune. Fantastic tune by, well, they were Jefferson Starship by that time, right? Jane, you're playing a game you never can win, girl. Fantastic tune. I was tied up on the phone. Well, you're allowed, Charlie. Are your parents back from their trip yet? I don't even know. They've been gone 2 weeks now. Hello, Rhonda. Rhonda, who I've gotten to know through Messenger recently. Rhonda, fantastic seeing you tonight. That's really good to see you. Now you get to see who is this Ed guy that I've been talking to. It's me. D, it was just dropped. It was just dropped when I sent it to you. D, like I said, I didn't have a chance to really analyze it. Yes, they're back. Okay, Charlie. Thank you. I didn't know. I don't even know how long their trip was. I did get a few of those pictures from Egypt. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. It would be good to go there if you didn't have to do all that flying. So what has gone on since we all got together? Well, most importantly, I do not have another car yet. I did talk to a guy on Saturday about a red Mustang in Texas. But it does seem to have, there's an engine light on it. And I told him there's no way I could ever be interested in it unless that really got fixed. Because you have to remember, if I were to go to Texas to get the car, I have to drive it the whole way back to Florida, and I'm not getting stuck on the side of the road. But he was real cool about it. We had a good conversation. However, he has not gotten back to me since. So there's that. There was another car here locally with real low miles. The problem, and I know it doesn't sound like a big one, but it is. It has these huge decals on each side of the car. So somebody had a regular Mustang and then put these like flames or whatever on each side. I don't know. Not my style, of course. And, of course, the problem would be if you take them off now, they're going to leave some sort of shadow, and you can try to... I just would not want to take the chance of getting that car, taking those decals off, and you never can get the paint to look right. Because the problem, of course, with the decals is they're covering up the paint, from when it was new or whenever. And so the rest of the paint is oxidizing. It's getting faded in the Florida sun and everything. Then you take those decals off and they're like, the paint under that is like new. And you can try to work it and everything, but you don't want to take a chance with something like that. So I was motivated to go look at it because it's here locally, and then the person never got back to me. So I don't know. And then there was a blue one I was looking at in Georgia. It got sold. And now there's another one silver one in North Carolina, but they told me that they have some local who's interested in it. So I'm just striking out all over the place. The good news is the Sonata continues to run. So that's why I'm not in any rush. I'm not really pushing this, but I'm continuing to look. It's getting a little draining, just to be honest. But there is a car out there for me. I just haven't found it yet. In other news, trivia this week was not good. We missed an opportunity to win last Wednesday, which was unfortunate. And then on Saturday, I don't know. This team, my perception, this team plays better when I'm not there. So there's that. So trivia this week was unspectacular. You might remember, like 2 weeks ago, we came in second in both time, and then both leagues, or whatever you want to call it. I was on different teams and came in second in both. Yeah, that didn't happen this week. But maybe you could tell that I am feeling a lot better. Man, I was struggling last Monday. Whew. Last Monday for the live show, I barely made it through. I was just a complete snots machine, and it was all on the right side of my face. Everything was coming out this nostril. This only half of my throat was sore. It was bizarre. Everything from here over this way was fine. Everything over this way was horrible. Really weird. But I managed it. Of course, I got the episode done. But you did hear, I think, from the interview that I did, me blowing my nose and everything. I'm sorry. I warned you because it's kind of gross and everything. But the show must go on. So that's really been about it. I am down to 172 pounds. I've hit that number a couple days in a row now. My first really level on losing weight and everything is 168. So I still have about 4 pounds to go. And at that, I will just only be like a couple pounds above the weight that I was when I worked at Star Trek over 20 years ago. Now, granted, a little older now, muscle mass is reduced a little bit, but not a lot. Not a ton. I know I see all those low T commercials and Doug Flutie and whoever it is that does those commercials and everything. I certainly don't need any of that. But it's been okay. It really hasn't been that tough. Not using any drugs, no Ozempic, nothing. This is good old fashioned cutting calories, getting rid of certain foods. And like I said, it really has not been overtly difficult. I know that sounds so weird. Charlie says 2 weeks with Max Miller from the Tasting History channel on YouTube. I don't know anything about that, Charlie. That's news to me. Denise, good to see you. I did see your post. Congratulations to you. And I know you've been going through some tough times, but I saw the posting recently. Congratulations to you. I'm hoping the best for you. And then the Cake. What's going on, Cake? Good to see you. Thank you, everybody that's taking some time on their Monday night. I thought the Winter Olympics were fantastic. I really enjoyed watching them. I thought the coverage was excellent. I watched as much curling as I ever will for my entire life. I loved every second of it, even though the United States were a bunch of jokers, except for the mixed doubles. They got a silver, but the other teams, chokers. Love the hockey. I just caught I'm not a hockey fan at all, but I caught the last part of regulation time, and then I saw the Americans win in OT. That was pretty cool. caught that. I will have to be honest. The only thing that I didn't watch is actually what I think most people watch, and that is the figure skating. Didn't watch any of it. Not into it. As I was telling some other people, watching figure skating gives me anxiety. You know, I'm so afraid that they're going to fall. It's not even about injury. It's just about falling. I hate seeing them fall because it's a technical, very, very technical program. You have to hit all those jumps and everything. I'm just so afraid. I just feel bad when that happens. But I can, on the other hand, weirdly, I can watch the speed skating where those athletes are falling all the time. That doesn't bother me. It's the figure skating. They go up in the air. I'm like, don't fall, don't fall. I'm like, land it, stick it. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. So I watched everything but that. I watched the bobsled, the luge, the skeleton, all the jumping, snow stuff, the slalom ski. If I'm doing work, sitting here on the couch, getting work done for upcoming episodes and other things I'm doing behind the scenes. I thought it was really, really fantastic. I know that there is a segment in the United States that looks at the Olympics and too much money and corporate overload and and all that, and I just can't get with any of that, to be honest. I just can't get. I know there's a lot of underhanded dealing and how countries are picked out. Of course, that happens with the World Cup that's in the United States this year and everything. That's not a fault of the athletes. That's not a fault of the people who love these sports or anything. That's just because humans are involved. Let's not take it out on the athletes because the people who get into positions and leader, these positions, don't have the greatest, most perfect morality. Let's not do that. So I enjoyed it. I'm all psyched up for the Summer Olympics in 2 years in LA. I know my brother Brian and I have even talked about going out and partaking in them in the RV. Of course, that's a long ways off right now. He and I have also talked about going maybe to some World Cup matches come this summer, but the tickets are outrageous. So it's just been pretty chill. It's been beautiful here, except for today. It was chilly and windy here today. It felt like several of those days that we had back in January. It was like, is it ever going to get warm again? But chilly and windy. In fact, it was so windy, they didn't even work on the building today. That's, because they're in the scaffolding, they're hanging from the roof and everything. If it's windy, they can't be doing that. All right, so that's about what's going on since we all got together last. I'm just trying to think of anything else. I don't think anything else. Oh, we do have something funny that I may show you before we're done. I'll have to. It's not on the agenda that I have typed out on my other computer, but if I can remember it, maybe it's just an example of the lengths that I will go to study a disappearance. This is a first. This will be a first. And like I said, if I get it through this other stuff, I'll show you. All right, let's get into the true crime portion of the live show tonight. Once again, as you are watching, you can give this show a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, just hit the button down in the bottom right-hand corner if you are watching on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, do what you can. Join the page or join the discussion group, like the page, write a nice review, on and on and on. Wow, look at this. Whitney is in the house. Whitney, I've also been following what's been going on with you. It is so fantastic to see you in the chat tonight. And I really hope that you are doing Well, fantastic to see you. I know it's been a minute, but I guess I can go back to saying Whitney is in the house, right? I can go back to saying that. So I think it's only appropriate that I start with Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. This is a disappearance that Unfound featured, it seems like yesterday, but I think maybe back in 2019, 2020. You might remember that I had a member of Molly's family on. Her name is Paula Fielder. I've not spoken to her recently. I certainly have not spoken to her about the recent developments. It is true that two bodies, bones were found in the general area of where, I think most of you know what this disappearance, what the circumstances were, but I'll go through it very quickly if anybody forgets, or maybe you're not even familiar with the disappearance. If so, go find Unfound's episode on it. Molly Miller and Colt Haynes were with a guy named Con Nip. Local criminal in Oklahoma. And Con had a reputation of getting into police chases. He wanted to play his own real-life version of Grand Theft Auto. And this particular time, Molly and Colt were with him. They didn't even know him that well. Maybe Colt did. And even Molly and Colt had not known each other for that long. But they're in a car. They're getting chased by police. Con is driving. They're throwing rocks at the cops and everything, and it's at night. And eventually, they get away, and they go down these back roads off into this field. And then eventually, Con ditches the car out in some field and runs off. Seemingly, Colt and Molly are still there at the car, but Con runs off. Does not wait for, as far as we know, doesn't wait for them anything. What has always made this disappearance hard to understand is that it's true that Molly and Colt were alive hours after Con ditched the car. In fact, to the point that they were using their phones to talk to people, and the sun had already come up. Of course, this was summer. Sun comes up fairly early, maybe 6 in the morning. They're talking to people 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, whatever, and then the phone calls just stopped. And Con was certainly at home, and in fact, once again, I didn't go back and check all the notes or anything, but it is surely documented Colt and Molly were alive when Con had already made it home. People tried to go out and find Molly and Colt. Couldn't find them. People who I think were concerned, I don't think there's anything suspicious regarding this, went out, driving around in that general area, honking their horns. Hey, if you hear the horn, go in that direction. None of that worked. Of course, they did search parties, but some people did not allow searchers to go onto particular plots of land. Con's vehicle was found. It was towed out of there. And Molly and Colt just weren't found. Phil Klein, if you don't know, was involved in this disappearance at one point. I think working with, in particular, Molly's family. Of course, he didn't solve it. It only got solved until recently. Maybe some other private investigators, independent people took interest. Of course, their disappearances had been covered many, many times, even before Unfound got to them. And, there's always been this kind of shadow of foul play. That somehow did Con Nip actually go back out there and find them and kill them? Did somebody else do that for him? Or did somebody else completely disconnected to Con do this? Lots of rumors. And I can remember back when I was talking to Paula way back 6 years ago, that she had mentioned some of these things. There is a story out there that Colt had talked to one of his friends and something along the lines that he had tried to climb up into a tree and then fell and broke his leg, and he was in a creek. And I guess we'll know now. If most of the remains are there, I guess they'll be able to determine if Colt had had a broken leg. But the overall idea is, how do two young people who really were not out in the middle of nowhere? I mean, once again, Con in the dark found his way home. They were not in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. They weren't at the top of Mount Everest or somewhere like that. Really, they were within maybe less than a mile from a paved road. There were houses in the area. Why? As I've always stated, if the sun comes up, you would see which direction it came up. You know that was east. You might even see all the tracks that the car left, because Con was driving through a field. You'd see the tracks. All you have to do is follow the tracks back to the road. It's a stumper. And in addition, it seemed like their phones worked when they were calling friends or people, but every time they would call 911, the call would get dropped. Is this a 911 problem? I'm not sure we even have answers on that. Lisa says, with a name like Con? Yeah, actually with two N's, Lisa. And hello, LaFord. Good seeing you tonight. It's a head scratcher. It's a real head scratcher. But you should know, Colt wasn't the greatest guy in the world at all. I feel, if this is Colt and Molly out there, I have complete compassion, sympathy for their families. But we talk about people in honest terms here. Colt was involved in meth manufacturing. Molly was a few years younger than he was. Did she know what he was wrapped up in? It's unclear. I think the only thing we can say for sure is Molly should not have been around these two guys. Maybe just a little too into the bad boy, image or something like that. I don't know. But it's hard to understand how two young people can't find their way out of something like that. But it seems they did not. I will tell you that I went back and looked at what I wrote in the Patreon blog, patreon.com/Unfound podcast, to see what I wrote at the time. And as I've already written in the discussion group on Facebook, this is the disappearance that I got wrong originally. But you should know, in my write-up toward the end, as I posted in the discussion group, I did write, they need to go out and search all of that area over and over and over and over again. Well, that's eventually what solved this disappearance. So I got that part right. But what I got wrong is that I convinced myself that this was foul play. However, I think all of you know that when I have commented on this disappearance since, and it's come up once in a while on this live show and elsewhere the last 5 years, my idea has shifted to the idea that this was not foul play, even though I realize that's going to be very difficult to understand for a lot of people. Now, we don't know yet. The bodies have just been found recently. But we also have to be open to the idea that this could end up being a Tom Brown situation, where the remains are found, but we never exactly know what the cause of death is. Very common with circumstances such as these. Unless it's like Janelle Matthews, where her remains were found after 35 years and there was a bullet hole in her head. It was very, very clear. Outside of that, it may be hard for even a very, very experienced medical examiner to look at them and determine why they died. They do. Of course, I'm going to talk about it. But given that they were found in the general area of where they were supposed to be, given that it seems they weren't buried, it doesn't seem like anybody on purpose tried to hide their bodies. The only reason, and you should know, familiar theme, the reason I think they were eventually found is because they were found on a piece of property that was not allowed to be searched the first time around, or the second, or the third, or the 10th. And finally, that piece of property got sold. The new owner said, yeah, go ahead and search it. They went down there. That's what all that activity was last week. And they found them. So, I have it even in here in my notes. I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. The reason I say that way is the reason I'm surprised is, I have to admit, I've been surprised for a lot of the resolutions to these disappearances. Hello, fishing, by the way. Hello, Haley. How are you? I'm almost surprised. Zoe Campos, Andrea Bowman. I'll pick one. I'm most of the time surprised. You never know when these things are going to happen. I have to admit that when I heard that they were going back out there, and if you watched me and D last Thursday, maybe a little doubtful. What are they doing again? We know how many times police go out and search areas years later and don't find anything, and we just wonder, well, what were they doing? So I'm surprised they found them, but I'm not surprised that they found them there. I know that's weird. It's hard to explain. So this was a search that was originally on property that was originally off limits. Like I said, I originally got it wrong, but since about 2022, my opinion on it changed. Why? I don't remember. I don't remember why my opinion changed, going from foul play to some sort of just died due to the elements, even though I know that's hard to understand. I know it's hard to understand in the moment that they could die from exposure or something, but if they both got injured somehow, but it doesn't sound like they were injured after the car wreck. I don't even think the car was technically wrecked the way we might call wrecked, like running into a brick wall or anything. So what happened, even I have in my notes, it's hard to say. Now, very well may be tomorrow that it comes out, yeah, they were both shot to death multiple times. Well, that'll be something. And then I guess I can go back to being, I guess I was right when I wrote the original Patreon blog. I just have a hard time understanding who went back out there. My big thing has always been, if they were out there alive and didn't know where they were, how were they supposed to explain to anybody where they were, that somebody could go out there and get them, to kill them, rescue them, or whatever else? It's hard to understand. Yeah, we're out here. Well, come find us. Well, where are you? I don't know. And as those people stated, I think people with good intentions were out there driving around honking their horns and just, of course, that didn't work. It was just hard. It just eventually, after I wrote that blog, at least a few years later, I just think I just started saying, how did they get found again? And that's still a question in my mind. Somebody went back out there to kill them after they're already lost. It just seems unlikely. Not impossible. It just seems unlikely. But this will be a topic. This is certainly a unique kind of disappearance. I mean, how many disappearances have we had where the person driving the getaway cars, actually makes it back to civilization, doesn't go missing, but a passenger or passengers go missing? It's a unique one. And as I've stated, like with Nancy Guthrie, when we have a unique type of disappearance, I think we have to look for unique reasons that the disappearance is still a disappearance. So we have to start looking, if it is true that Molly and Colt died not due to foul play, but the elements or something like that, then we really need to understand that. If they were elderly or something, then we'd understand that. So I don't have any good answers right now. But I had to talk about it. It's an unfound disappearance. Even though I do an update episode every 4 months, that when these things happen, that like with Christian Balky Thompson recently, I have to talk, I have to talk about it. I'm obligated to talk about it, and I want to talk about it, and I like to talk about it. And, I know you want to know what's in my head, especially regarding Unfound's cases, because those are the ones I know the best. Although I've certainly been commenting on other disappearances that Unfound has yet to cover. Maybe some of them will end up on the podcast one of these days. But the ones where I feel like I have the inside info or the inside feel for it are the ones that have been featured over the last 9.5 years. I think what we can surely say, I think that it could still be murder, but I think the stories, these wild stories that they were seen, far away or somebody's house or something, that have come up once in a while, I think we can surely reject those now. But that doesn't mean we can totally reject foul play totally. I just hope that we get a firm cause of death, whatever that may be. With the understanding, though, if it was natural causes or exposure, that's going to be very, very difficult. It's one of those things that, of course, if there's signs of violence, it's murder. But if there are no signs of violence, well, it could still be murder. It makes it very, very difficult. I feel horrible for the families. I know, not to give too much away, but I know even in the discussion, little messenger group that I have with my assistants, Cherie, Eric, Carrie, and Emily, in particular, Carrie and Emily, we had a little bit of a discussion about that this morning. And I would just say my opinion on the situation was a little different than theirs, and that's fine. That's fine. So, there you go. That's really all I have to say. Maybe this time next week, I will have more to say. All I would tell you, I'm going to guess that maybe you're going to watch other YouTube shows. Maybe somebody's even going to do a podcast coverage on it. Be wary of anybody that's jumping to, big conclusions and saying, I knew it was murder. We really don't know much yet. We just know that most likely Molly and Colt have been found, and we know kind of where, and it's in the general area that everybody thought. That's all we can really say for now. All right, let's move on to, how about we talk about the little bit of work that I did on the ground this past week. What was it, Friday? You even forget what day it was. Was it Thursday? Was it Friday last week? I don't remember. There is an older gentleman, he's in his 80s, who went missing from where I live here in Pinellas County, but and I maybe even talked about this last week. 7 miles to my right, like almost directly due east from where I'm sitting right now. Due that way. I'm pointing that way, over that way. And completely at the opposite side of the county, over there by Route 19, which is a north and south highway over there. And I'm kind of over where I have played disc golf, like if you look it up, Cliff Stevens disc golf course, the Coachman course, going in that direction, kind of, although it's still kind of south of that. He is from Europe. He doesn't speak English. He only speaks Albanian. And the only thing I know about the language Albanian is that it was Albanian. The Albanian language became a plot point in the movie The Inside Man. Remember Spike Lee's movie with Clive Owen about a bank heist? Remember that? Remember he plays that recording of an Albanian ruler. If any of you know that movie really well, I know it's a little obscure. But that's the only thing I know about the Albanian language. Well, unfortunately, Petro, his first name's Petro, Petro, last name Kuko, Kuqo. What a name. Fantastic name. And he unfortunately had dementia. He had just recently been staying with some family, and then they had moved him over to this apartment complex to live with other family members. And back in December, so it's been a couple months now, he got out of bed in the morning as he usually did, and he would have coffee or something. He was still functioning. But the two other family members who were with him, were they still in bed or something? Somehow he just walked out the front door, like he had sweatpants on and a long sleeve shirt or whatever. And he was walking around the parking lot of this apartment complex. And they actually have him on video. You can Google it and see him for yourself. And maybe 20 minutes later, one of the people inside noticed, hey, where's Petro? Must have gone outside. They went out to find him. He was gone. And they were able to establish the timeline that he had gone outside about 20 minutes. He had been outside for about 20 minutes before the family members noticed. They went out there, started looking around, couldn't find him. Extensive searches have been done. This is a pretty big apartment complex. It reminds me quite a bit of the apartment complexes I used to live in Las Vegas. You know, they're not a high rise like what I live in now. They're kind of spread out. They're like 2-story spread out apartment complex. And there are apartments that are vacant. They went through all the vacant ones. They went and looked at other video. There is a car dealership immediately to the north. There's a convenience store across the street. There's a boat sales place south of the complex. Directly to the east is the highway, and it doesn't seem very likely he would have made it over that highway. That highway is always busy. And to the west, though, is kind of a gated community, but the gates open and you go back there, man, there's some really nice houses. Fairly large tracts of land for Pinellas County, being this very, very industrialized, very urban county. But some really nice houses with fairly big yards and everything to the west. But there is a way that there's kind of a corner part of the complex butts up against a very gnarly, overgrown, fairly large overgrown area, kind of like to the northwest. And it does seem like there's a little path in there or something. But you go back through there, as I was looking on Google satellite view, that will take you to a little waterway that will eventually take you out into Tampa Bay. So less than a mile from this complex is water. So we have to keep that in mind. Less than a mile, not close, maybe 2/3 of a mile. Of course, he's in his 80s. He has dementia, not overtly physically able, but of course he could walk. doesn't speak English. And so there's been all sorts of coverage here locally. I've been following it. I don't know anything more about this disappearance than anybody else does. But I decided to get involved. I was able to track down a family member. I'm not going to go into everything that we talked about, but I had an opportunity to talk to her. I'm going to say it was last Thursday night, maybe after. No, it couldn't be Thursday. It wasn't Wednesday night. Maybe it was Wednesday night. Maybe it was after trivia last week. Could have been. And then Thursday morning. So I talked to this woman 40 minutes or something, and she was, I was getting just more facts and just gave her my insight, even though I hadn't been over there, but I'd following the news. We had a really good conversation. And then Friday morning, I just took it upon myself to drive over there. I think it was Thursday. One of those ones. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, somewhere in there. To drive over there myself and just kind of get a feel for the area. And it's even though you may look at a satellite view and say, well, this area is easy to search, it's not. It's just not. Now, you should know, unfortunately, it does seem that the police are leaning toward the idea, he was walking around there, out there and got picked up by somebody. That is very, very, very unlikely. I mean, granted, do we have bad areas of Pinellas County? Of course. But to think that a nefarious individual just happened to go by there when he was out there and picked this guy up, it's overtly unlikely. I mean, just the timing of it, it just is so unlikely. Nothing rules it out. There are no facts to rule that out. But it just is unlikely. Now, of course, the tough part is you have a dealership to the north, you have a convenience store and a boat sales company to the south. And, of course, they have video cameras. The only video camera in the area that seemingly picked up Petro walking was the one in the complex. Tough. It's tough. But I did establish that the only way he could have walked out of the area without being seen on video is going back through that gnarly area that I described before. And it's one of those, even though I know Sherlock Holmes is not real, it's Arthur Conan Doyle, who I don't think had any special, detective abilities or anything. He could just write interesting mysteries, just like Agatha Christie could. Give them a real life mystery. I don't know what they would have done with it. But, once you rule out everything else, whatever remains is your answer. So if you're telling me that he would have been seen on video on a camera in any other direction, and there's really only one way out of there that isn't on camera, I guess that is the way he went, even though it goes against our sensibilities and our logic, and you've heard me talk about that. This is what I mean by that. And I passed this along to the member of his family that, and I was giving the examples of like Daniel Villarreal. There's no logical way anybody would have thought to look in that woman's backyard in her pool house. Nobody. Nothing. Zero. There's nothing you could ever learn about disappearances that would point you there. But it happened. So this is kind of the way you have to look at it. It doesn't make any sense that an old guy would go try walking through this gnarly area, but I don't know what to tell you. Even though it seems unlikely, that is more likely than him getting picked up by some stranger. The timing and everything. Unless, I threw around a few other different ideas. Here are some other things that have gone through my head regarding this disappearance. Once again, I know they're probably not very likely. How about thinking about this? Now, you should know there are houses in the area. There are houses that have pools. And how about the idea that, this guy is walking around, strays away, walks into one of these local houses' backyards, drowns in the pool. And the homeowner realizes it and realizes that the pool's not in code. There's no fence, there's no this, there's no that. And now he or she has a dead man in the pool and the guy is drowned. Now, I don't know. I'm going to guess this has happened at least once in the history of the world. But the person might start thinking, man, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get sued. He's dead anyway. I'm now seeing on the news he had dementia. He probably wasn't going to live for many years anyway and everything. And the person just covers it all up, fishes his body out. I know that sounds cold and everything, but that's no different than a hit and run. And hit and runs, as I detailed, a couple weeks ago, I think or maybe this past episode regarding Keith Roberson, or maybe even before that, there are 800,000 hit and runs in the United States per year. 800,000. And so what I'm describing here with him falling into a pool and somebody covering up, that's no different than a hit and run. And we know those are happening at a clip of 800,000. A lot of people doing that. I don't even know how that breaks down how many per day. I didn't do the math. But this, I think, is the way we have to think about this disappearance. Because it has to be something, unique. Although we should state that if people with dementia or Alzheimer's are going to disappear, it's like this. They walk off. Somebody turns their head. Suddenly they're gone. They don't know what they're doing. It's not like they're trying to escape necessarily. They just wander off. You turn your head for 2 minutes. You look back, gone. And we've covered a few disappearing. David Hardy Jr., among others. This is how people with these mental afflictions usually disappear. It's usually not, anything that's coordinated or planned or anything like that. And of course we have disappearances where they're in cars, like David Hardy Jr. And I remember there was an Unfound Now from last year that I covered, an older woman who got in her car and just started driving around. And she ended up being found deceased with her car, like next to an airport or something like that. I forget the woman's name now. This is how those types of people usually disappear. But for the general public and the people who have taken an interest in Petra's disappearance, they don't know that. So this all seems outrageous to them. Well, it must be foul play. It must, been planned, or it must be that or that. Are we sure that his family members are telling the truth and everything? Yeah, I get it. It's an urban area. I mean, I don't think people would be as suspicious if this happened out on a farm in Kansas. But it's really just the same. And you have to remember that I think a lot of this happens. I think remember, the population is aging in the United States just like it is in every country. People are living longer. You're going to have more and more people that have these problems. And what do we hear about? We usually only hear about these types of people who go missing. What we don't hear about are all of these types of people who wander off and are missing for an hour or two, and then they're located alive and they're brought back to their house, to the living facility, the hospital. You don't hear about all of those unless it goes for an unusually long time, and some of them people usually are found alive. You don't hear about the people that go missing for just an hour or two. I'm under the impression this is happening a lot because I'm aware of how many people have these problems. So although it may be unique for Petra to go missing and say it's not a very high percentage disappearance overall, I think what is being not intentionally covered up, it's just, just the way things are, that a lot of people are wandering off, and then just some of them end up like Petro Kuko, I think. Hello, Lydia. How are you doing? LaFord says, great movie, The Inside Man. Yeah, even better soundtrack. Yeah. Right. Yeah, great movie, LaFord. Really, really good. I haven't seen it recently. Lydia and Dimension Diabetics seem to be attracted to water. I don't know anything about that, Lydia. I'm more than happy to believe you on that. The question would be, was he even aware where the water was? You can't see the water from the apartment complex. So you may be right about that. I don't know if we can automatically jump to that conclusion in this disappearance. It very well may be that he ended up going through there and getting the waterway and drowning. It's horrible. Very well could have happened. But I don't know if what I'm talking about here is necessarily what you're talking about. But you can expect that. I will be doing the next Unfound now will certainly be on Petro, of course, unless he is found first. And I will be able to diagram this all on doing, of course, map analysis. And then you will see what I mean. But if anybody wants to be, get an A+ in the class, you can just go to Google Street View or Google that satellite view and do it for yourself. You should be looking for the apartment complex is called The Point at Clearwater Apartments. They sit right along Route 19 in Pinellas County, Florida. The Point at Clearwater Apartments is the name. What's the area like? It's not a bad area, but all I would say is the apartment complex looks old. Let's just put it that way. I don't know when it was built. It just seems like it was built a while ago. And that doesn't necessarily make it a bad area. There is certainly a Ford dealership that borders it on the north. And even with something like that, how do we know that Petro didn't walk over there and climb inside one of those vehicles? Have all of the, if one happened to be unlocked or locked or something, did all of them get checked? And there's a bunch of pickup trucks there, which I know you can, if they have, tonneau covers, over the bed, and they can lock them shut. Of course, that would make it difficult for him to get into the bed of one of those. But was every one of those pickup trucks, they must have 50 there? Were all of them checked? These are the kind of things that go through my head when I go over there. I don't know if those are the kinds of things that go through an investigator's head, a searcher's head. I don't know. It's tough. It's really, really difficult. So, of course, the odds, unless he really did get abducted and somebody's taking care of him, I guess is, maybe like we're thinking with Nancy Guthrie. Unless it's something like that, I don't see how Petro could be alive now. Unless somebody picked him up and took him to some condo somewhere and, feeding him. And, because once again, he's 80 some years old, just like Nancy Guthrie. He needs medication. It's not just his dementia. Of course, dementia, horrible, certainly eventually, a death sentence, unless the person does some car wreck or something first. But there certainly were more immediate health concerns for Petra. I'm sure he was on medication, maybe high blood pressure. Those things are more likely to kill him if he got abducted than his dementia. So, very sad. All right, moving on. So, yeah, I went over there, did a little sniffing around. Last time I did that had to have been for the disappearance of Robert Helfrey. This was a guy who went missing years ago in his car. I only missed that disappearance by a couple blocks. There was some foul play angles around Robert Helfrey. People were thinking, really, did he? Because this friend that he was supposed to meet seemed to be a little evasive and everything. But once I got involved doing Unfound, one of the things you realize when people disappear with their cars, they're usually going to be found with their cars. And all you have to do is take a Google satellite view of Pinellas County and see how many canals and lakes and ponds and water features and fountains and everything there are in this county. And then you start looking, well, where was he? And if he was headed home, he was probably drinking and driving. What if he missed this turn? What if he missed that turn? What if he missed that turn? I had a particular body of water picked out, not anything that I could have ever gotten anybody involved in. It was just a hunch. It was not the correct one, but it was only a couple blocks away from the right one. Eventually, there was some scuba group that was going body of water to body of water to body of water, and eventually found him. It was some kind of retention pond right to the entrance of a little community, and that's where he went in the water. Only missed it by a couple blocks. So I've done this before in Pinellas, but of course, right down the street is where Kelly Rothwell was almost certainly murdered by David Perry. I go by that condo building all the time. In fact, I think I did a video of it. You can see it on the YouTube channel. So I've been by a few of these locations, but it's been a while since I, actually went just kind of riding around, snooping around for an unsolved disappearance. Okay, moving on. So Miller, I'm going to get to Helen Brock. Maybe we're going to do that last tonight. Need to continue to talk about Nancy Guthrie. I will tell you, it's interesting. Most of the people I know do not take any interest in disappearances. Even though there are people in my life who know what I do, I think they respect me for it, but they're not into true crime. They're not into disappearances. I wish they were. What are you going to do? But for Nancy Guthrie, I have had more lay people who I know ask me about it than anything else that has been in the news since I started Unfound. This is certainly something that is broke way outside the confines of what we call true crime. As examples, this past Friday, I had a phone meeting with a guy who does some money managing for both my dad and myself. We had a meeting scheduled. He asked me about it. We talked more about Nancy Guthrie than we did about money. To be honest, that's true. That is true, because he knows what I do, and he was picking my brain. Well, what do you think about this? And I go through my spiel. which you've heard before. And then even today, the guy, one of two guys who have put together the Unfound podcast.com website, and we're redoing my consulting site. And also I'll be talking about that more. Decided to go in a little bit of a different direction. So I needed to talk to him today. But even after we talked about the missingpersonsconsultant.com website, he asked me, so what do you think about this Nancy Guthrie thing? Now, I've known this guy 15 years. I've known him virtually since I moved to Florida because he used to live almost right next door to my brother and his wife. And he is the guy who actually runs the football pick'em league that I talk about during football season, and trying to win a league that I've won twice, by the way, over the years. So I know this guy really, really well. Good guy. But he has never asked me about, he's asked me about the podcast just in general, but nothing about a specific disappearance. After we were done talking website stuff, he asked me about Nancy Guthrie. And we ended up talking about that longer than we talked about the website. I had my cousin, who I'm friends with there on Facebook, not going to say her name. She asked me about Nancy Guthrie last week. So, and there are other people. This is, this is what my life has been like. People who I've never discussed disappearances before, now coming to me, asking my opinion. And you may be wondering, well, what do you tell these lay people, these people who otherwise really don't pay attention to this stuff? Here's what I tell them. This is how I talk to the lay person. I tell them you first have to understand that an elderly woman being abducted from her home in an area like that is rare upon rare upon rare as a type of disappearance. That's the first thing you need to understand. I don't know what they're saying out there on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, News Nation. I have no idea. But this is the way I look at it. It's important you to understand how rare this is. If this was a 10-year-old at home by herself, like kind of what happened with Janelle Matthews, not as rare. A little boy or girl walking to school and getting abducted, of course, unfortunately, too common. If Nancy Guthrie was married, but she and her husband were estranged, and she's living there and he's living in LA, and then she gets abducted in the middle of the night, somewhat rare, but also diagnosable, if that is even a word. In fact, we've had a couple disappearances like that. Maybe Linda K. Carroll. She was living separately from her husband, and I happen to believe that it was her estranged husband who came down with his kids from Tennessee or whatever and just dragged her right out of her house. So these kinds of disappearances happen. People getting abducted from their homes. Not very common for elderly people, men or women. Very, very rare. And it's not just because of their age. And because I would even, she was 84. I would even go down into the 70s age range, even to the 60s age range. She doesn't have to be 84 for it to be rare. I'd be saying this if she were 68. I'd be saying this if she were 72. Now you get into the 50s and 40s. All right, maybe not as rare. But this is the way I look at it. That's the first thing I tell them. The second thing I tell them is the way I look at disappearances is if you have a rare type of disappearance, then you have to look for a rare motive. If it's surely an abduction, which this surely was, we got the video of this guy out there. Maybe he had accomplices. But she certainly was abducted. There is no chance that she got up and walked away. In fact, that type of disappearance, when we get to people of this age, much, 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 much more common. It may be like Petro Cuco with dementia, or they may be having mental health issues. Maybe they have been diagnosed with some terminal disease, cancer, and they just can't take it anymore. And they're going to just walk off, and maybe they know where there's a bridge, jump into a river. That stuff happens. That is way more common than what we're talking about here. So you have to look for you should be looking for a rare motive for this. And so what I do then, as I tell these people, recently, of course, the allegation that this was a burglary gone wrong, that's something now that's been thrown out there. I told them, could be true. I don't have any more information than anybody else, but that they are saying this weeks after she went missing, it sounds to me like they're grasping at straws. Why? Because a burglary would be obvious from day one. They would be able to say the TV's missing, her jewelry's missing. The drawers have been ripped out and there's stuff all over the floor. There's a safe that's been opened and it looks like there was cash in there or something. That's gone. They would know that from day one, and they would surely announce that. That it took weeks tells me, well, they're just fishing around for a motive. They don't really know what's going on. But I also tell these people, I've told the website guy that got today, the Money Man last Friday, and others. Once again, these are people I call lay people, just regular people who are not true crime people. I tell them that you also have to understand that burglaries and disappearances don't go together. They just don't. Of course, we have burglaries all over the United States. How many of those do you think end up ending being accompanied to a disappearance? Virtually zero. Burglaries and disappearances don't go together. I'm not saying they can't, but you just can't throw that out there because it's just not true. Once again, if it is really, really rare. Then we have to start thinking, well, if burglaries are common and disappearances don't go along with burglaries, then if this was a burglary, why did he take her? This is the way you have to think about these things. We might come up with the idea, well, maybe it was a burglary, and the reason he had to take her is because she recognized him. Or she, being the Damascus, maybe she recognized his voice or something like that. That's just throwing that out there. We have to look for something like that to put together a burglary and a disappearance. Because otherwise, they don't go together. If they were together, there'd be people going missing all the time because burglaries are so common. That's not what's going on. What I've also told these people is when you look at this whole, these ransom notes that, for example, that TMZ are getting. I don't know about these notes any more than any of you do, but they don't sound very definitive to me. And what I mean by that is these people, if it's ransom, they want their money, whether it's in Bitcoin, lira, euros, whatever currency they use in North Korea or whatever. They're going to be very explicit, but they want the authorities, the media, whoever else, they want to make sure these people know that they are really the people. I am really the kidnapper. Here's proof, because they know the only way they're really going to get their money is if they do that. This doesn't sound like what these messages are, because we can start going through, well, how would you go about proving you are the real kidnapper? Maybe take a picture of Nancy Guthrie, tied up. And if they're emailing it or whatever else. or in their message, however they're sending their message out, say, reveal something about Nancy that only Nancy would know. Show that you have inside information on her to make you believable. Now, of course, the most common thing we think of is the Zodiac Killer. Zodiac Killer certainly wanted everybody to know, yes, I am really the guy that killed all those people. Now, how did he do that? Well, one particular way is after he killed that taxi driver, he clipped off a piece of that guy's bloody shirt or jacket, cut it up, and ended up sending part of it to the San Francisco Chronicle, as was documented in the movie Zodiac. That's how you go about proving to people you are who you say you are. That is not what has been done with these ransom notes. Because this person would surely, if I'm thinking about this, I want to make sure they know it's me without, of course, them figuring out who I am. Well, there's many ways to do that because they would probably guess, you know what? It's going to make it on TV. There are going to be fakers. I need to make sure I am the real deal. That's the only way I'm going to get the money. That's not what has happened. So this is the dissertation. This is kind of the thing that I've gone through at least twice in the last couple of days. This is what you might call a crash course in disappearances for the layperson. Now, I know many of you have been following it a lot more energetically than I have. I've read a couple stories on it. I just make sure that I'm not necessarily missing anything, but I'm not watching any live shows or, the people who've been down in Arizona following the cops around and everything else. Certainly not done anything like that. I just don't think it's worth it. I think that's actually fairly unhealthy. But I ask you, for those of you who have been following the news, let's just say, energetically or something, do you get that? What I just went through in the last 10, 12 minutes, do you get that on any of those channels? I wonder. Because I think this is the way you get people to understand disappearances. Instead of going along with the sensationalism. If they ever asked me to be on, this is what I would be saying. And I know that the stats back me up. I mean, really. You think about Unfound's disappearances. Have any old people been abducted, from their homes? Linda K. Carroll was abducted. Certainly, we've covered the disappearance of some old people but have any of them actually been abducted? Did any of them go missing during the course of a burglary? Maybe with, oh my God, Evelyn Hartley. Maybe whoever did that broke into that house looking to steal something, not knowing that Evelyn was there. Maybe. No proof of that. I don't think anything was stolen. She was taken. So, this is where I am on this. I have to admit, as I've told those people, I still, even though I know I'm in a very small minority, I'm still thinking that this could be fairly personal. As I was even telling the guy today, we have to remember something. We've only heard the good stuff about Nancy Guthrie. I'm not saying she wasn't a good person. I don't know. But wouldn't our perception of this disappearance be different if you were to find out that Nancy Guthrie was a raging bitch? Now, just saying that, probably for most of you, you're like, oh yeah, it would. We've been told she's just a, hello, Emily. Assistant Emily, everybody. Everybody say hi to Emily if you could. Would not our perception of this disappearance change if we found out that Nancy Guthrie actually wasn't a very good person? Yes, her daughter says she was great, and her daughter isn't necessarily lying. I'm not putting this on Savannah for this. But what if we were to find out, yeah, Savannah and her mother got along well, but Nancy, they're living by herself. She was bothersome of her neighbors. She was nebby. She was up inside other people's business. She was doing this. She was doing that. Maybe, she didn't want to pay her property taxes. Yeah. Our perception of the disappearance, it goes from a little old lady from Arizona goes missing to, well, this sounds like somebody who people might have had an axe to grind with her. But this is the exact reason that I do Unfound the way I do it. We present the people honestly. Nothing is gained. We're thinking too much about pride and all of those things. If we're only going to say every person that has been featured on Unfound was the greatest salt of the earth person. Instead, we give a very realistic 3D view of it, because that is how you learn about disappearances. And I think that's the way you solve them. Because there are so many of Unfound's disappearances. If we wouldn't have talked about the people's mental health issues, if we wouldn't have talked about their addictions, if we wouldn't have talked about the relationship problems they were having, if we wouldn't have talked about how they ran away before and all of that, how much would all of you be in the dark about those disappearances? You'd think you knew about those disappearances, but really, you really wouldn't know anything at all. And so for me, given that I know this is generally how, now granted, I'm not the only person that does that. I think that Marissa over at The Vanished and other, John Lord, I think a lot of people do give very realistic views of missing people. But you have to remember, we're doing this all the time. We take the work we look at the work a little differently than the major news corporations do. They're not used to doing this. And so we're just going to get the sympathy out there and everything else. And that doesn't help. It's nice. It's polite, but it's not helpful. So I'm still open to the idea. I'm not saying I would have disliked Nancy Guthrie. I don't know. But I think that I'd like to hear a little more about her that didn't seem so sugar-coated and polished and airbrushed and everything else. Because like I've already demonstrated, all me saying, imagine if you were to find out that she was the worst woman on the block, then maybe somebody getting angry at her and wanting to do something to her isn't crazy. It's not necessarily a rare kind of disappearance. Then we start thinking, well, this is revenge or something. Just a thought. And so that's still where I am. When you start talking to me about something like this, as I stated last week and maybe even the week before, I've known, although my dad has never gotten wrapped up in any of this up there, but he's told me about his neighbors and stories he hears about neighbors not getting along and people, turning people in for HOA violations and arguing about how big their American flag is, on and on and on. You just get the idea. I guess no one ever grows up. So Emily says, wow, Emily, coming in with all the words. Everyone has skeletons. Many times it doesn't come out until they go missing. They run for office and someone gets mad at them. It could have something to do with it, but it could not. A lot of times that isn't found out until you find the evil person who did it. Yeah, it just could be a personal grudge that maybe is just It's just imagined. And in fact, the website guy I was talking to today, I did even say to him, this very well could just be some sort of tinfoil hat person. The guy saw Nancy Guthrie at the local Olive Garden, and something struck him that he doesn't even know that she's the mother of Savannah Guthrie. It says, I think that woman is the daughter of the Antichrist or something. This is where we are today. I mean, how many of these, these mass shootings and people, inexplicable. And what do you find out? People just weren't seeing reality for what it was. So, what I'm saying overall, obviously, as I think the coverage has been lacking. It's certainly a lot of it. A lot of people putting in a lot of time. I just don't know how in-depth it is. I just can't say. It seems, my perception, it's a lot shallower than what I do on this podcast every Friday. And if that's the situation, then I think it pays to be cynical about the coverage. Emily, some of the neighbors didn't know she was Savannah's daughter, so it may not have anything to do with it. Yep, now police are saying those two pictures of the man they've released are from different times. That, Emily, that is what D sent me tonight. Unfortunately, I just have not had a chance to look at it yet. All right, so that's all I got to say about Nancy Guthrie tonight. I do now want to go to this North Carolina mother. And yes, we'll get to Helen Brock last. And of course, we have a disappearance coming up this Friday. I did the interview this evening, a spectacular interview. This is a story that has gotten a lot of attention. In fact, somebody even posted it in the discussion group on Facebook. A North Carolina woman who went missing 24 years ago while going Christmas shopping has been found alive and well. On February 20th, the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office said Michelle Hundley Smith, 62 years old, who was first reported missing on New Year's Eve 2001, December 31st, 2001, had been found after detectives received new information about her disappearance. And I don't think they ever do say what that new information was. Authorities made contact with Smith at an undisclosed location in North Carolina, alive and well. Smith was 38 years old at the time of her disappearance. Her husband was the first person to report her missing back in 2001. She had left her home to go Christmas shopping at a Kmart, those were the days, in Martinsville, Virginia. I've been to Martinsville. On December 9th, about 17 miles from her home, and never returned. In 2020, her daughter Amanda Smith told NBC News that on the evening in 2001, she remembered her mother kissing them goodnight and leaving their house around 8:30 p.m. Amanda was 14 years old at the time. Her younger brother was 8. The older sister, who was 19, had already moved out of the house. Amanda said her mother was always there when she got off the bus from school, cooked their favorite meals, and while she wasn't very strict, never let them get away with everything or anything. At a request, Michelle's current whereabouts will remain undisclosed. Officials said Smith's family was notified that she'd been located and were informed about her request to keep her whereabouts undisclosed. So I guess what we're saying here is this is another Mary Jane Van Gilder situation. Woman is married, has kids, leaves. Just up and leaves. Although, of course, as we are seeing here, we don't know if she got married again. We don't know if she had kids again. That is not been disclosed. Probably never know. So what am I to think of this? So what I want to do with for you is kind of try to take a look at this. Let's say we had gotten to this disappearance on Unfound before it was solved. Let's say that back in, let's pick a year, 2021, I had found out about this disappearance and was able to track down someone in Michelle's family, certainly not her husband, because I'd have to be suspicious of him, and talk to this person about Michelle, what was going on. Would I have been able to pick, correctly predict the resolution to this disappearance? Would I have been able to do that? So let me see what everybody's saying, and then I will continue. Day D, we're all saying hi on YouTube. Hello, Emily. Not a lot of experience with missing persons cases in the area, that's for sure. Are we surprised? Nope. Emily, howdy, folks. And Emily just saying hi. Emily, all you need to know about Emily is how she came into tonight. She's just very upbeat, talkative. That is why she's been an assistant for what was going to be almost 9 years now. And LaFord, and they said she would never leave her kids. Yeah, it's one of the worst cliches going, LaFord. I know it's horrible, and I almost get the idea sometimes when I say it that people are like, well, what do you know, Ed? You don't have any kids. I'm going to keep saying it. Parents are leaving their kids all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going missing. But people are leaving their kids, and guys, all it takes, unfortunately, some guys is some woman 25 years younger than them to wink at them at the gym, and suddenly they're leaving their wife and kids behind and moving in with this 25-year-old, not being a good father. There are guys like that, and women doing it too. This whole thing about she would never leave her kids. Well, some people would never leave their kids. But the problem is every person says that. Every family member says that. And we know a lot of these people end up being wrong. You just don't know what's going on. Once again, going back to like the Nancy Guthrie situation, people trying to put the best spin on the person. That's not helpful. That is not going to solve your disappearance. What's going to solve your disappearance is by saying, you know what? She was a good mother, but you know what? I think I could see her leaving if she really got depressed, if she really got down, if she really had anxiety, if it was this, if it was that, if she really couldn't stand her husband anymore. Because this is what it usually ends up being. These women, it's just men can leave too, obviously, maybe even more so. These women who, disappear and we don't suspect that the husband did it or the boyfriend did it, a lot of them do leave by choice and aren't abducted. Emily, I feel so bad for that daughter and the rest of her children. Unless she has a good reason for leaving, as in she was being abused, should face charges if she wasted resources. Someone who's really missing or endangered could have really used those resources. Maybe she was being abused. Lisa, for the record, if I ever go missing, I would absolutely never leave my kids. All right, Lisa, thank you for that. So if I'd known about this disappearance a few years ago and I analyzed it, what would I be thinking? And all I have is this article. And I think there was a page on the Charlie Project about it, but now that it's been resolved, it's just one paragraph. It might have been very descriptive before that. I don't know. Here's what would catch my attention. Maybe most importantly, her husband was the first person to report her missing in 2001. That is a big deal. Now, granted, it took a while. It says here that she went missing on December 9th, but he didn't report her missing until December 31st. That's what? 31 months, 22. That's 3 weeks later. Yeah, that's not the greatest. It certainly would catch all of her attention. Oh my goodness. Well, this guy could have done something to her. But I think in my mind, I would still be thinking, well, he did file the missing persons report. He didn't act like she wasn't coming back. There wasn't a new woman who moved in 2 weeks later. He wasn't selling her clothes. He wasn't doing this. He wasn't doing that. This would certainly catch my attention. Certainly would not let him off the hook. But I think on that enough alone, this would not be a disappearance that I would necessarily right away put in the man said category. I don't think I'd be doing that. What also I think would keep me from doing that is that she obviously left her with her car. I don't know what, who knows what she did with her car. There's nothing, I don't know. Maybe that's in a different article or somewhere, but it's not in this one. She obviously took off to go shopping. She left in her car. Well, what did she do with that car? Don't know. Maybe it couldn't be that she's still driving it. So, because the registration and everything and the license plate, I think that they would be able to do some paperwork and figure out something was going on there. But being that she and her car were missing would also, I think, lead me away from the idea that her husband did something to her. What would also lead me away from the idea that her husband did something to her is a 14-year-old at the time saying, yes, I remember her leaving by herself. This isn't a 4-year-old. This isn't a 5-year-old. This is a 14-year-old, a person, a human who understands the general human dynamics. Memory would be fairly solid, especially if this child was asked about it not long after it happened. Of course, the 14-year-old would also then be able to explain, well, you know what? Here's why it took my dad so long to file the police report. All of this, I think, would take me away from the idea that the husband was responsible. That none of this would rule out foul play. It very well could be that she went to Kmart and she got carjacked and somebody took her car and killed her. Certainly, the way I understand it, there are no facts to dispute that. But then we'd have to start thinking about, well, if she went to Kmart, is there any proof that she was there? Do we have video? Do we have credit card receipts? Did she actually purchase something? If we were to find out that, you know what, her credit cards were never used again, she's not seen on video, then I have to start thinking, well, what are the odds she got there and got carjacked before she even went inside? My perception is these things usually happen when the women are coming out, not when they're going in. So then I think that I would start thinking, was she really telling the truth? Was she really telling the truth about going to Kmart? Maybe she had another man in her life. In fact, if I had to guess, this actually might be the answer to this disappearance. That she did have somebody else in her life. Some guy, maybe she was cheating on her husband. And this had been arranged and they had worked this all out. And I'm going to change my name. And you're going to be, the guy's going to say, yes, this is the woman I met on my vacation last year when I went to Vegas, or something like that. So like I said, I'm not saying I would have gotten it correct, but I'm just telling you how I would reason all of this out, given just what is written here. I think I'd be thinking, I don't think the husband did it. Very well could have gotten carjacked. Maybe she was suicidal. Maybe she took her car and drove it off a bridge somewhere and drowned. The car is missing. What have I said? The longer you go from a disappearance with a car and person missing, more likely it is that the car and the person are going to be found together. This, of course, goes against that. There are exceptions. So I think that's the conclusion. It's not a very firm conclusion. I don't know if I could have predicted 25 years later that they would actually track her down and that she would be alive and that she would even be in actually the same state of North Carolina, which is something. So that is interesting. But, this has a very much like a Trevor Nichols feel to it, which is one that I predicted that he would probably. There's a very, very good chance that he had to be alive. Probably would have gone in that direction. But even with Trevor Nichols, I don't think I could have predicted that, he's going to go to San Diego and be a homeless man for all those years. And I'm so happy he's back with his family. I certainly couldn't have predicted that. So I think this is where I am on this. No, I'm not guaranteeing that I would have gotten it correct, but I think I would have gotten some of it correct, just with the reasoning that I've gone through with all of you. My perception is this was not a spur of the moment thing. This does seem to me to be something that was planned. And like I said, I think that we have to be open to the idea that she maybe had somebody else. Maybe she had a woman in her life. I don't know. I really don't care sexuality or anything. It very well could be that she had another person in her life. And as some people, just don't want to live a lie anymore. Could be. Emily, I read the daughter's post basically saying people should apologize to her dad for blaming him. Yeah. I have to admit, my heart goes out to him. Yeah. And Emily, bring up a good point. Maybe that is the reason she did it this way. Maybe it was an abusive relationship and she was like, oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to leave and I'm going to do everything in my power to kind of make it look like you did it. Could be. Could be. But for that, we would really, 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 really have to know more about their relationship, how they met, what was going on. Being that this daughter is posted, like Amy said, now what's this, 25 years ago? So she would be 39 now, a grown woman. Maybe she has kids of her own or something. Get that perspective on it. Very, very mature perspective on the home at the time. I'm not saying I want to do that. But if we really wanted to study something like this, this would be the way to do it. And then we would be able to kind of, once again, collect that information, put it on a little file, in a doc file. And you might be able to use, future use. When you run across the disappearance, that's kind of the same thing. Well, it seems like the man said, but wow, there are facts in here that lead me away from thinking the husband did it. And then, of course, you go to the Michelle Hundley Smith file and you start going through and it's like, well, maybe this woman ran off and started a new life too. Emily also says, I've got to give it to that daughter. It seems she's really trying to find her. She was doing more than some families do. The trauma she must have. Well, I'm sorry I didn't run into the daughter, before. And I don't know if she's happy this happened or not, but I wish I would have run into the daughter maybe 5 years ago, and then she could have been on Unfound. That's my fault, not hers. Okay. That's the best I can do with the information. Like I just did this off. I wrote down notes, but you should know I just did all of that off the top of my head, even though I took notes. My notes actually say the age of the children is important. Of course, that they were very young and the father might be able to get away with something at home. Reliable witnesses, husband filed the report. I might have thought she got carjacked. What did happen to her car? That might be interesting to know. Of course, we don't need to know what her new name is and where, everything else. But I would like to know what she did with the car. That might be interesting. I didn't either. I was just looking back once Tanya sent it to me. Yeah. Hello, Maureen. What's going on? Good to see you. And you should know one more thing. I did go to newspapers.com to try to look this up to see what people were saying, what the reports were at the time. Not one story. Not one. Zero. Not one news article about Michelle's disappearance back then. Nothing written about it since then, since 2001. Zip. At least on newspapers.com. I understand that newspapers.com does not have every newspaper in the world on it. But not one thing was written. Why? I don't know. All right, Helen Brock. This is the disappearance that I've, mentioned that when I heard about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, I thought, well, I remember there was that Helen Brock woman. And I will admit, I got a little bit of it wrong, but I'm going to just go through this anyway. This is a very complicated disappearance. I only have 15 minutes left. I'm just going to read this, and then you can, if you're interested, you can go do your own research on your own time and your own education on your own time. Helen Brock had kept a checkup appointment at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not New York, Rochester, Minnesota, on February 17th of 1977. So we just passed like the 49th anniversary. The doctors there found nothing wrong with her, save that she was overweight. After paying her bill, Helen began walking back to her hotel. She stopped at a gift shop and purchased $41 of cosmetics and bath towels. Of course, $41 back then went a lot further than it does now. She told the clerk she was in a hurry because her quote-unquote houseman was waiting. Now, you should know Helen did not live in Minnesota. She lived in Illinois, and I'll get to that in a second. She said that her houseman was waiting. Investigators are not sure what Helen meant. She was traveling alone, and no one was seen with her. However, Helen did have a houseman named Jat Matlick, M-A-T-L-I-C-K. Matlick claims he met Helen at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. So what he's saying happened is that, yes, she went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, flew back to O'Hare, and he picked her up. Unfortunately, though, after the disappearance happened, police went to the plane crew, tracked down the crew that was on the plane that day. The plane crew could not remember anyone matching her description on the flight. And remember, this is the 1970s and not really any video and those things. But however, this crew was not interviewed until a significant period of time had passed. Matlick says he picked up Helen at O'Hare, drove back to her home in Glenview, Illinois. He says then that weekend, Matlick, he kind of took care of the property and everything, he called his wife and he told her he would be staying in Glenview because he had work to do at the Brock estate. This woman's rich. She was worth $20 million in like the 1970s. That's like $200 million now, just to give you an idea. His wife later said this was uncharacteristic of Mr. Matlack to stay the weekend like that. He normally lived apart from Helen in a house she owned in Schaumburg, Illinois. What Matlick then says, so he picked her up at the airport on Friday. He stayed at this other place through the weekend. And then what he says happened is that he then drove Helen to O'Hare, back to O'Hare at 7 a.m. on Monday without much baggage or a flight reservation. Helen normally traveled with lots of luggage and a carefully planned itinerary. She is also a late riser and would not normally fly out so early in the morning. There's no record of Helen flying out of O'Hare that day. And it doesn't seem that Matlick ever told anybody, well, okay, so where was she going? Where was she flying? I don't think he ever mentioned that. Matlick said Helen signed several checks totaling $15,000 before she left. So just put another zero on that for $26, like $150,000. Many of the checks were to his benefit. When investigators determined the checks had not, in fact, been signed by Helen, they had been forged. Matlick changed his story and said he signed the checks for her because she had injured her hand. Handwriting analysis experts do not believe he actually what's important, though, is handwriting experts at the time. Now, remember, handwriting analysis, not scientific. But the experts at the time do not believe he actually signed the checks. However, the signatures were never tested against anyone else's writing. Now, as I've already stated, his wife told a different story about, Matlick says he did one thing that weekend, but the thing is, he told his wife a different story. Now, you should know, somebody did confess later to her murder, but I think if you go to the Charlie Project and you read, it's a very, very long. In fact, Helen Brock's the description of everything for her disappearance might be one of the longest entries on the Charlie Project, just so you know. And also, there's a Wikipedia page. But in that, it's going to tell you about how somebody confessed. I think you don't need to be a missing persons expert to read it and say, yeah, this does not sound like the truth. This is somebody looking for a deal or something. What also, though, is mentioned in the Charlie Project, once again, it's too long to read, too complicated. Could have been over a bad horse deal. Remember last week with Leonard Derrickson? That there is an idea out there still to this day that she, after her husband had died and she had gotten all that money, somebody had gotten her interested in investing in horse racing or something. And this person scammed her. And this person, who might have been connected to the mob or something, might have been afraid she was going to go to authorities. The problem is this person is not this Matlick guy. In fact, it's not even clear that these two even knew each other. So you have this horse deal fraud thing that could be a motive. But then you have the Matlick guy with the seemingly the forged checks, and his story doesn't match up. But these two different things are not connected. But you should know there's no record that she had ever complained to anybody about this horse deal problem. This might have not even been something that she even knew about. Maybe it only got exposed until after she was missing. It's very well she might not even known that she had put money into a scam. Of course, the major point is this Matlick guy told different stories. Of course, the money information. I would also say she bought bath tiles in Minnesota before she flew back to Illinois. It seems like an odd choice, doesn't it? If she flew there, I mean, bath towels, of course, the kind she would be buying, not the kind that a bachelor like I have, but a rich woman like that, she's going to get those big, fluffy ones that take up a lot of room. She actually bought some bath towels before flying back to Illinois. Was her stuff not hard enough to pack as it was? Did she really need one more thing to carry? Now, you should be asking, well, how far is Rochester, Minnesota from where she lived? About 5 hours. Not a crazy drive. And I think that's where my mind goes for this disappearance. Of course, I would stand to be corrected if there is records of her flying from Chicago to go to the Mayo Clinic. Certainly, it would then be most likely that she did fly back. But I don't even know if they looked into that. And even if they did, it was many times later. And, back then, can they go back and check if somebody was on a flight? It's the 1970s, it's not even the 1990s where you might be able to go back and check that very easily. What seems to me And you should know ransom was part of this. There was the idea that given who she was, that a ransom would be forthcoming, a ransom request would be forthcoming. Somebody took her because they wanted to get ransom. Here's this rich woman, take some money out of her account, send the cashier. It's the way you used to do it in the 1970s. There was no ransom request. So that is something. But like I said, it still reminded me of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. My perception on what happened here is I think this Matlick guy did do it. He's the one that was with the checks that were seemingly not signed by her. He's the one whose story didn't match up with what his wife said. He's the one who maybe got out of his pattern of where he would be on that weekend. Lisa, I'd have my houseman just drive me there. What the heck is a houseman anyway? Well, we're not like Helen Brock, Lisa. But I know, Lisa, if you were like Helen Brock, you'd have like 3 pool boys and everything else. I know you. So I think what happened in this disappearance is that I think he drove her to the Mayo Clinic, and I think he killed her on the way back. I think that would when she said, well, my houseman is waiting. Well, he's waiting at the airport back in Illinois. She would say that to somebody. Because, he's waiting at the airport that I got to go. No, I think, at least the way regular people use English, is that would mean that he's waiting in a car somewhere close by. Of course, the problem is he says that he picked her up from the airport. I think he drove her to the Mayo Clinic because he had to, because she couldn't miss that appointment. And then on the way back, he killed her. If my guess is correct, I think that Helen Brock's body is somewhere in Minnesota. He came back, went back to the house, forged those checks, thought he was going to get away with it, and I guess kind of almost did. But that's a disappearance from 1977. 49 years old. I have no idea how you would go about. I don't think this Matlick guy is alive anymore. Of course, like I said, it's 49 years ago. Even if he was just 40 at the time, it'd be like my dad's age. Of course, my dad's still alive, but most men don't make it to 89. So I've been mentioning, or he's waiting at a hotel. That's what I thought when I first heard it. Right. Yeah, he's waiting back at the hotel. Right. Because she didn't fly there. They rode together there. And it very well may be that he didn't even have a plan. Maybe just being in the car with her those 5 hours was just enough for him to lose his mind and said, I'm not doing this. On the way home, I'm getting rid of this woman. Could be. So that's Helen Brock. Like I said, very complicated, lots of names, lots of moving parts. You go to the Charlie Project and read her page. It's very long. It even might have a connection to those disappearances of those 3 young women who went to the beach in Indiana. Remember, I talked about their disappearances a couple months ago. Some people even trying to draw connections between Helen's disappearance and theirs. You can see what you think about that. All right, this Friday, being that we only have a couple minutes left, I'm feeling great, but I still got some mucus cough going on. This Friday, we're going to take a look at the disappearance of Brianna Vibert, Vibert, from the state of Michigan, Flint Township, Michigan. And her mother, actually, the woman who was her foster parent, who then adopted her, her name is Bobby Joe. She was the guest. We did the interview today. It went not quite 2 hours, but this might be one of the most efficient interviews I've ever done. Of course, recently we had like a 3-parter. This will just be one episode, won't be in parts. There's a lot of information, but Bobby Joe was excellent at keeping things very, very concise, and don't I love it? But Brianna had a lot of problems. And that night, she got into a fight with her boyfriend. She walked down to the local convenience store. She got picked up by a stranger who took her to her job. She worked at a strip club. The stranger, who she didn't know before, waited there while she was inside. She came back out, got back in the car. They went to a different convenience store. She was completely looped, barely able to stand up. Eventually, this stranger left. She is seen on video talking to somebody in a Green Ranger, somebody who has not yet been identified. The Green Ranger leaving Brianna by herself. She walks off, the camera screen, never to be seen again. But there's a lot more within all of that. But that's the disappearance for this Friday. It happened on July 17th of 2017. So it'll be coming up on 9 years this year. So once again, Brianna Vibert, Vibert, Flint Township, Michigan, July 17th, 2017. Her mother, Bobby Joe, is the guest. Just did that interview at 5 o'clock today. So that's all I got for you tonight. What a great show, if I must say. Man, just a very, very thick show tonight. A lot of content. If this were a kind of cake, there wouldn't be a lot of air bubbles in there. Very heavy type of cake show tonight. I feel really good about it. So give this show a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not become a victim. Do not end up on my podcast. Charlie, say hi to your sons for me. And we'll do this all again next Monday. Good night.